experience in the food industry. I have expertise in quality assurance, quality control, research and development, new product development. Um, Today we have this webinar that is being hosted by Global Food Business Network, a professional network for food experts in the entire value chain from farm to fork. So our mission at Global Food Network, Business Network is to foster a network of food professionals dedicated to promoting excellence and safety across the food supply chain. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's fundamental to our health and our economy, the critical link between water quality and food safety. We're not just discussing theory, we're going to be using real world examples, and we're going to explore why these fundamentals of water quality are so crucial for every food business, from a large factory to a small home kitchen. Joining me today are experts in the industry. We have Tsitsi Mtanga, a quality manager for one of the meat processing companies here in Zimbabwe. We have Trelani Sibanda, a water quality manager from Zinwa, who manages the regulatory side of things, and Tatenda Mumvuma, a molecular scientist from the Biotech Institute. He understands the technology behind detecting these hidden threats in water. So to start, Tsitsi, please tell us, as a quality manager leading a food entity, can you enlighten us on the importance of water quality in a business that deals with food manufacturing?
Thank you. In the food industry, I'm in the meat processing sector, and so far, my experience has demonstrated it. So where chemical sorry, my network had dropped. The microbial quality of water, when we're looking at microbial quality, we are looking at the amount of total, the number of coliforms in the water, the presence of E. coli. So all these factors are factors that, from my experience, we've been looking at to say, what are the parameters, what are the levels, and can we use this water in our production? So when you're looking at the chemical parameters,
Tsitsi, we cannot hear you. Are you still there? Apologies, Tsitsi must be having a network glitch. I'll pose a question to Tulani. Based on research that has been done with regards to water quality, from a regulatory perspective, what do you think is the connection between the water sources a business uses and the end product? And what kind of fundamental controls are needed to prevent water contamination?
Thank you so much, Titi, for that question. Basically, when we look at that question on water sources, there's a connection between water sources and the end product. Is very direct and critical. All of us, we know that water is the fundamental ingredient that can also ensure safety or sometimes it can introduce contamination during the production chain. From the regulatory perspective, we require that businesses implement what is called a multi-barrier approach. And what is that multi-barrier approach? It starts with the resource water assessment itself. Before anyone can just start business, you need to understand the source of the water that you are bringing into your system. And therefore, that on its own ensures the quality of the water that comes in. You get to know what quality of water gets into your system and how to deal with it. But the second issue that businesses, we encourage them to do is that they introduce what is called the point of use treatment systems that is appropriate for the intended use. What do I mean by that? Is that suppose that water comes in, let's say it is high, a particular pollutant or a chemical pollutant is very high, then you need to have an appropriate technology to deal with that for treatment. But lastly, we encourage business to have what are called control measures. These control measures are very important. They, in terms of the control measures, will be dealing with the regular water quality testing from the source itself and throughout the process, so that the final product, you'd know that the final product is free of any contamination. It is very, very, very important. But also in terms of the food business, you need to introduce the hazard analysis and critical control points system that can able to identify contamination where it occurs and able to prevent and able to implement preventive measures at each particular stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulani. You spoke of control measures that can be implemented in a business. What are these control measures?
The control measures that you can able to do in a business setup, especially what we wanted to really talk about today in terms of the ICE that Dr. from the UZ wanted to speak about. You have at each particular stage, you know, in a production system, it is stages, various stages. At each particular stage, you must able to put some testing measures at each particular stage. I would say that when the water is introduced or when water comes in, the input water comes into a system, you must able to test to know what kind of water is getting in. Then immediately, once you know the quality of the water that gets into the system, then you are able to deal with it at that particular time. Then you move over to another stage of the process. At that particular stage of the process, you need to also put some testing measures as well. It is basically, those are the control measures that we are talking about.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned that in a food business, you can introduce HACCP, which is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. In a home setup, what would be best to do to make sure that you're using clean water?
In a home setup, normally we receive water like we are talking about. Maybe let me talk about in an urban setup. Normally, in a home, people receive water from the municipality. It is water that coming from the municipality is perceived as it has already been tested, you know, and found that it is suitable for home for drinking water purpose. Yeah, but sometimes, you know, because of the challenges, if you look at our our Zimbabwean perspective, sometimes because of the challenges of infrastructure, damages, old infrastructure, you find that sometimes water comes out from a tap, and you look at just with the natural eye, you look at the water is so quite dirty because of those particular challenges. So in the home setup, we encourage that you have some some tablets that you can put in the water, or some filter system, small filter system that are used for home use. Filter the water, then you have disinfectant tablets to treat that water at a small scale. But the understanding is at a home setup that water that is brought by the municipality is clean water. But in a Zimbabwean perspective, we've discovered that here and there, especially in huge urban centers like Harare and Bulawayo, water is not always as clean as it should be.
Okay, thank you, Tulani, for that. I'll move on to Tatenda. At a molecular level, what are the primary contaminants that we should be worried about in water being used for food production? Research has been done and it has shown that there's fecal bacteria that has been found in some bottles of water and some sources of water. Can you explain what that signifies for food safety?
All right, thank you, Tatenda, for the questions. I will try by all means to answer all the questions. I think you asked 2-3 questions. So in terms of when you look at a molecular level, the pathogens that you're likely to find in water that is contaminated, you're looking at bacteria such as your E. coli or your fecal coliforms, right? And you're also looking at other bacteria like Salmonella, Listeria, and the Vibrio species of bacteria, the one that results in cholera. Then you also look at other viruses that you can actually find in water. You've got viruses like your norovirus or hepatitis A virus. You can also find it in water. And you also have other organisms like microorganisms like protozoans that you can also find in contaminated water. So those are some of the pathogens that you can find in water at a molecular level. Then the next question, what was the next question?
Can you please explain what that signifies for food safety if we find that these contaminants are present in the water?
All right.
What
Okay.
does that mean?
Okay. So it's never a good thing. It's a huge red flag when you find fecal coliforms in water. What I mean by fecal coliforms, we're looking at a group of bacteria that you only find in intestines of warm-blooded animals. So that means when we talk about intestines, we're talking about colony, right? And for that to be in water, that means fecal matter was actually passed into the water. So now you're drinking water that has fecal matter. So the fecal matter is usually like your coliforms, like your Klebsiella, your Enterobacter, or West E. coli. And with E. coli, normally you have, the very pathogenic strain, like the virulent one, which is your E. coli 0157H7, which is never a good thing to find in water. So once you have that in water, then that means your water is most likely contaminated. And then when you use that water now for food processing, I usually like to use an analogy of if you're looking at a conveyor belt, or if you're at an airport and the carousel is dusty, right? It's full of dust. That means all the bags that are on that carousel or on that conveyor belt, they are also dusty because the conveyor belt is dusty. So if you're using contaminated water, that means that whatever you're making, the food that you're making, is also going to be contaminated with that fecal matter. And once you have food that's contaminated with fecal matter, the result can be very, detrimental. We're talking about the diarrheas, we're talking about the cholera species, because normally fecal coliforms, they just indicate that, this water is heavily infested with bacteria. But then that doesn't mean it's just coliforms. You're also looking at the Vibrio. And the Vibrio, we don't have to look further than probably the 2008, 2009 cholera outbreak in Zimbabwe, where we had approximately 5,000 deaths, right? And most of them were in Harare. So using such water will result in, food contamination. So that's cross-contamination from the water to the food. And that results in those, diseases that, people are really scared of, your typhoid and your choleras. Thank you.
So basically, we are saying that if the water is contaminated, it literally translates to a public health pandemic, epidemic, I don't know, something like that. But it could be very detrimental.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly what it means.
Thank you very much, Tatenda. Would like to explore how we will navigate through regulations and industry practices. And I'm going to pose the first question to Tulani. Tulani, would like to talk about the regulatory framework here in Zimbabwe. What are the key standards that businesses must adhere to ensure that water is safe for food production? And how can a company, big or small, work proactively with ZINWA to ensure that they're on the right track?
Oh, thank you for that good question. In Zimbabwe, we use several key standards, but the first one is the Water Act itself. It gives us the guidelines in terms of the potable water standards in the country. But as well as we have the Public Health Act. This one is more specific for food grade water. It gives the standards for the food grade water. So when we are talking about food, especially it is housed under the Ministry of Health itself, because when we are talking about food, it is a public thing. But all these standards in Zimbabwe, they're in compliance with the WHO guidelines for drinking water quality. These guidelines, they include zero tolerance for E. coli, which is deadly. It's a pathogen, and all the types of the coliforms and all other chemical contaminants that might be there in the water. But may I pose that for industries, for businesses, they need to partner with ZINWA so that they can be in compliance with their water standards. First, you need to engage us during your planning phase, not after you have started your business, then problems arise. It is at this planning phase where we can, you able to do a consultation with us so that we can do what is called a water assessment for you. And in this water assessment, we provide the compliance roadmaps for any business. We're able to tell you for this business and for this water system or water source that you have, you are able to do A, B, C, D. But secondly, as in this partnership with ZINWA, we can establish some regular monitoring points for you, where we can able to assist you to develop some sampling protocols, and as well as to connect you with accredited laboratories for testing. In Zimbabwe, the most accredited laboratory that you can able to do your testing, especially for water that is accredited, is Standard Association of Zimbabwe, so which is called SARS. But as well as ZINWA, we can also advise you to join a certification program that is internationally accredited, the ISO standards certification. That can only be done, mostly we recommend that you go to Standard Association of Zimbabwe. So for me here, sitting here, the key for any business is transparency and as well as continuous communication with us regulators, so that we are partners together in this thing, so that we can able to protect the public health. Thank you, Tatenda.
Thank you very much, Tulani, sorry. To our participants who are in the audience, you can pose your questions, you can throw them in our chat box, and we can discuss them as our discussion continues. Tatenda, I would love to ask you, when a business wants to go beyond the minimum regulatory requirements, what kind of testing and monitoring technologies are available to them to ensure continuous quality control? And what's the value of being proactive as being opposed to being reactive when it comes to testing?
All right, thank you, Tina, for the two questions. Now I'm sure that those were two questions, right? Okay. So when a business wants to, to go beyond the minimum regulatory requirement, there are certain tests that they need to do, right? I think some of the stuff, Mr. Tulani spoke about them, right? So we're looking at various tests, and myself as a molecular scientist, I will, I will talk about some of the molecular tools that you can use. So a business has to literally just go beyond just compliance, and they have to make sure that they monitor their water quality, at various stages, right? Not just for compliance, but they have to make sure that they're doing it at certain intervals. It doesn't have to be once every 6 months, but water can be monitored for every batch and all that. So the monitoring tools that they might have to use, we can look at for detection of coliforms and E. coli, which is something that you're not supposed to find in water, like Mr. Tulani mentioned. WHO has zero tolerance for E. coli in water for drinking. So we have tools such as, very instant tools that can actually detect and just specify the type of species that's in the water. We're looking at real-time PCR. So what real-time PCR just does is it looks at certain genes that are found in different organisms. So if we're looking at coliforms and, let's say in particular, fecal E. coli, we're looking at a gene called UIDA, which is a beta-glucuronidase gene that is only found in E. coli. So what real-time PCR does is it amplifies that gene that's found in E. coli. So you've got a water sample, you just extract the DNA in that water sample, then your real-time PCR amplifies that and it detects that gene in real time. So you can actually see that this water has E. coli because of that gene that has been detected. And that gene being specific only to E. coli will ensure you that the water has E. coli in it. You also have other tools, that we use at our lab. You can use ELISA-based tools that just use enzymes, where we're saying in particular, we're just dealing with, the immune system of a human, right? When you get infected by a pathogen, you produce antibodies against that antigen, the antigen being the pathogen. So we can make kits, or there are available kits, right, that contain antibodies against particular antigens or against particular pathogens. So those will always link you. We have got this thing called antibody-antigen complex. Antibodies are specific to antigen. So you've got antibodies that are very specific to E. coli antigens. So you can also use those tools to detect, E. coli in water. You also have biosensors, which are very rapid. These are just small tools that I think every business owner could actually have. And some of them, they use what we call a rapid microbial detection by just looking at ATP bioluminescence. And they can literally just detect whether water or their food has got, has got bacteria in it, right? But then what it does, when you look at biosensors, especially the ATP bioluminescence, it doesn't necessarily tell you that it's E. coli, right? I think WHO has got a certain level of just what we call most probable number which is MPN, or total viable count. I think for WHO, the total viable count of bacteria that you're supposed to find in water, it should be less than 500 coliform forming units. But then this is just like bacteria. But then specifically E. coli or total coliforms, it has to be 0. So what some bioscientists do, they tell you that, yeah, there might be bacteria. Obviously, water is not going to be 100% pure. But what we don't want to find is the E. coli or the fecal coliforms. We don't want that. So you have to be more specific. You have to look for specific tools that can detect that. So you're looking at those, those reverse real-time PCR. We also have, when we look at microbiology, we also have specific type of culture media or agar that are chromogenic. By chromogenic, we just mean that, they can detect and they can specify that E. coli or coliforms is in this. So what these agar do is that they have special ingredients, right? Whereby if you culture your water on that agar, if there is E. coli or if there is coliforms, special enzymes that these organisms have are able to, metabolize such ingredients in that media, and then they can actually form colors in that media, which is very simple. It's not as complex as real-time PCR or even sequencing that we also use in our lab. This is just simple, basic microbiology. And from there, you can actually detect that, I'm having pink colonies. So this means this water contains coliforms. Oh, I have blue colonies. So that means this water has E. coli. Just based on enzymes, we have enzymes like the glucuronidase for E. coli. We also have beta-galactosidase for coliforms. So those, you can utilize those so that they can actually produce color in certain media. Then you can detect if your water has E. coli or coliforms. Then the second question, when you spoke about being proactive versus being reactive, you could look at something like having a smoke detector as a proactive thing and having an ambulance as a reactive thing. I think most people would choose the former compared to the latter, right? You have a smoke detector that tells you, oh, there's a fire is about to begin, right? By detecting the fire. Then an ambulance usually is a reactive thing, that something has gone wrong, right? So being proactive is better compared to being reactive. So we're just saying for business owners, to have your tests done before you produce your goods is usually better than reacting to your goods actually having the coliforms. Because I think in terms of monetary wise, it's better. It saves money because you don't want to find out that, oh, the batch that you've produced of certain food is contaminated because you used contaminated water. Then that means you have to remove and just wipe out all that batch. So that results in money loss. And it's also not good for the brand. I think, you damage your reputation, because once it's in the market, I mean, people, we have a certain, perception. I mean, if people know about it, then they're gonna talk about it, and that damages the reputation of the brand. So you'd rather be proactive, spend the money on tests, regular tests for your water, rather than you finding out that you have, the batch is contaminated. So you rather do that as a proactive measure than being reactive. I feel like that's the best way to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also want to add on that there is also serious risk of litigation, being sued because someone fell sick after they had consumed goods that had contaminated water. Thank you for that, Tatenda. We've got a question from the audience. Are the simple, easy to use rapid test biocenters that Tatenda mentioned available for purchase locally?
Thank you for that question. Yes, they are. Ourselves, we are a distributor for quite a lot of equipment, machinery, very easy to use, portable. If I'm to show you my presentation later on, I can show you some of the tools. They're just very portable, like just it looks like a briefcase. It has all the things that you need, and you test your water, and it just tells you everything that's in the water. So to get that, you can always get in touch with us, or you can just look for the Biotech Institute on the website, and we distribute for most of the companies. Most of them are European companies, others are Korean and Chinese companies that we distribute for.
Thank you, Tatenda. Move on to Tsitsi. In meat processing, water is used at every stage from cleaning to scalding to chilling. What are the most common water-related contamination risks you have seen in your field? And where in the process is it most critical to monitor water quality to prevent food safety-related issues?
Thank you, Tatenda. Thank you so much, Tatenda. So in meat processing, our processes normally start from the point where the meat is slaughtered. So we look at the quality of which, because our carcasses are washed to prevent fecal contamination. Remember, we've opened the carcass and we've got the intestines and all that. So we first ensure that our water is clean from that stage, where we ensure that the water is chlorinated to be on the tables, on surface. You find that having dirty water, like what not clean at the airport, it means all the bags are dirty. So
We seem to have lost it there. Titsi, you're on mute. You're muted. We can't hear you.
sorry, my network had dropped. So I was saying we also test the water that we use as an ingredient. Because of the nature of our work, some of the water that we use is actually used as an ingredient in water. So those tests are done so frequently, and we're also using systems like triple filtration systems, UV treatment, to ensure that no contamination enters the product. Because like you rightfully said, some customers can sue you. Some will come back and take that sample to SARS or to Biotech and come back and saying, this is what I bought from you, and these are the findings from the laboratory test. So as a business, we thrive and we try to ensure that the quality of water that we use, the quality of water that we clean with is also of good quality, because that is where it all starts. And another aspect is the implementation of systems. HACCP is a basic system that people can apply or introduce into their food business to ensure that the water that they are using is of good quality. Because of the principles of HACCP, you are required to do your hazard analysis And you can't do your hazard analysis leaving out the water, because the water is a critical component and it's an ingredient, like I said, in some of the processes. So because of that, you will be required to regularly monitor your water, be it the chemical levels, be it the micro levels. All that data needs to be demonstrated when the auditor comes to say, okay, we are testing our water. These are the findings that we have from the point of source to the point of usage. Like in our facility, we also we test different taps. So you can't just look at the source and say, because the source is clean, because remember, our water is moving through pipes. So you also need to ensure that every point where the water comes out, you've done your test. You also need to thoroughly wash your pipe systems, flushing it regularly to ensure that no buildup happens in the pipes. Thank you, Tatenda.
Thank you, Titi. Any questions from the floor? I guess there are none for now. We've noted that technology is shaping the future of food safety, and the public can be a part of the solution. Tatenda, in your work at the Biotech Institute, the Biotech Institute is at the forefront of innovation. How are advancements in molecular biology and testing making it easier and faster to detect contaminants in water and food? Can you give us a glimpse into the future of food safety technology?
Thank you, Tatenda. At the Biotech Institute, I serve as a molecular scientist. Particularly, my specialization field is actually genomics. So molecular biology is something that I do on a regular basis, right? I might have talked about microbiology and but molecular biology is something that I do for a living. So we have we have various ways to detect pathogens at a molecular level, right? Specifically, of interest, I'll mention two. The first one was the one that I mentioned, which was to do with real-time PCR, right? So what it does is it takes you away from from the whole culturing, the microbiology, where you have to take your water, you culture it on media, you wait for 24 hours, then you see colonies, you also take it, then you culture it on a more differential or selected media, you wait another 24 to 48 hours, then after that you do confirmatory tests like your microscopy, your all that. So it might take you 5 days for you to, to finally determine what's in your water, right? But when you're looking at real-time PCR, this is something that, can help you solve, the mystery in a matter of hours, just a few hours, I'm talking a couple of hours to 3 hours. And what it does is just looks at genes for particular species of bacteria that you don't want to find in water. And what it's just doing is, like I mentioned earlier on, that if you're looking at your E. coli, it looks at a gene that E. coli specifically has. If you're looking for salmonella in water, right? You're looking at just another gene called invasive protein A, which you just find specifically in salmonella, right? If you're looking at cases of cholera, you're looking for Vibrio species. There's specific genes that are just found in Vibrio species. So now, in the end, you can have a water sample, right, that is infested with different contaminants, microbial contaminants, and once you extract DNA for that water and you run it on a PCR or real-time PCR, it shows you in real time that this water is contaminated with E. coli, with salmonella, or with a Vibrio species, maybe Vibrio cholerae, and it does that in real time. We're talking 2 to 3 hours, and it's something that helps you with quick action if you're looking at something that is very catastrophic. If there's an outbreak, it tells you that. Then something also that we also do at the Biotech Institute is sequencing, right? So genetic sequencing is something about next generation sequencing, where you're not just looking at the organism or just various organisms. You're literally just looking at the entire genome of a specific organism. So it might be E. coli. So we want to see what strain of E. coli that is. Nowadays we talk about antimicrobial resistance, right? So we're dealing with organisms, and these organisms, what's so fascinating about them is they also think, well, not in a particular way, not in the way that we think, but then they are also there to survive. So they will try by all means to survive, right? So one particular way that they do is they share these genes of resistance. If a particular strain is resistant, it's likely going to share that resistance gene with another strain. Then at the end of the day, now you have a community of bacteria that is just resistant to certain antibiotics or to certain cleaning methods that you usually use to decontaminate your water or your water. Then at the end of the day, once you use that decontamination protocol procedure that you have, you will find out that the water that you still have is still contaminated because they're now resistant to that decontamination procedure or to those antibiotics that are available. So when we do sequencing, we're just looking at the genes. So we look at the genes and we see how the genes are, how are they different now from the previous strain or the previous strain, yes. And when you look at that, then you run things like bioinformatics, and then it tells you how common that strain is and where exactly has it mutated to form this resistant gene. So these are some of the, it's the future, right? You're looking at this, you're looking at genes, you're looking at, you're not just looking at strains from a morphological state, you're looking at genes, you're looking at how they run, how they replicate, how they do that, so that you can, once you start targeting the molecular level, then chances are, because the molecular, these are like the building blocks of something, right? Once you know how something is built, you can always, target it better compared to when you just see a house as a fool, you don't know how it's built, you don't know how strong that house is. But when you look at the 3D print, the blueprint of that house, you can see where the weak points of that house are. So that's what molecular biology does. It shows you, the blueprint of an organism and shows you where it's vulnerable, where is it strongest. And once you start targeting those, then you've got a higher chance of being successful. So these are some of the technologies that are coming up. Well, they're already in the market, the real-time PCR and your sequencing. And these are some of the technologies that we also use at our lab when somebody really wants to know what's happening in their water. So those are some of the technologies. Thank you, Titana.
Thank you very much. That's quite interesting. You should have brought some 3D images of this bacteria and protozoa for us to see. It would have been very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Tetenda. My question to Chelani. The public is often the last line of defense. What is one thing that you want every consumer to know about ensuring the water and food products they buy are safe?
Thank you, Tatenda, for that question. Now, you know that consumers need to be very, very active in terms of the whole safety chain. They should not be just passive in this. They need to be very, very, very active so that because they are the ones that get affected if, say, the food that they consume is bad in terms of the quality. So they must do it through informed observation and also reporting. When I talk about informed observation, when you get into a business, there are key indicators that you have to just observe and look. You just walk in, let's say, for interest sake, you walk into a supermarket. You must be able to check whether that kind of a business, it displays all the regulatory certificates that make that business to be certified to function. But key on those regulatory certificates, you have to check the health certificates. those ones are very important to check. They must be stuck somewhere in the walls of that business. But also, you just, as a consumer, you just need to just check some cleanliness standards that are there in that business. Check whether things are spick and span, and also how the products are stored. You know, certain products must be stored in certain temperatures. You know, it varies from product to product. So a consumer must be able to check that. Are the storage fridges working properly? Is the product stored in such a manner for the safety of the consumer? But here is another critical part that I want to emphasize. It is the reporting aspect now. Now, when you find that the business is not in compliance, you know, in Zimbabwe, we have two organizations that you can report to. The first one is the Consumer Protection Commission, and the second one is the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe. These are the two organizations that deal with consumer protection. So for the CPC, which is the Consumer Protection Commission, this is a government established body. I think it was established somewhere in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. But with an act, there's a Consumer Protection Act that enforces consumer rights. So the consumer has a right, if they feel or if they observe that the food is not in good quality, they are able to report to this organization so that this organization, that is CPZ, can able to deal with that business entity. But while it's the CCZ, which is the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, this is a consumer watchdog. So it's, they deal more on the advocacy side, education, but as well as the handling consumer complaints. So these are the two bodies that all consumers are able to report to, so that these reports they're very instrumental to identify especially the sources of contamination, but more so to prevent, if ever, some widespread illnesses that can able to take place. But also as a consumer, the consumer has a right, if they get into a business, to ask key questions. So consumers are empowered, all consumers are empowered to speak. So they must ask key questions. Like, for example, a consumer can get into a place and ask, where does this product come from? They have a right to ask. So the business, they should not feel offended to respond to those questions. Like the questions, what is the water source that has been used to make this product? You know, legitimate businesses, they always welcome these kind of questions because they are proud of their safety standards. But illegitimate businesses, they get offended by this. And once you see this kind of behavior, know there's something that is terribly wrong with that kind of a business. But lastly, may I pose this to all consumers and say, we can be able to vote with our wallet, which is, this thing is very powerful. So you are able to say as a consumer, I will only support businesses that are very transparent, that are committed to safety standards, using your wallet. What do I mean by this? You only buy products where you see that they've got what? Good safety standards. And those ones that are not having those good safety standards, you don't buy. So with this, it will make other businesses to see that why are this kind of business products being bought, then they're able to change and market their products very well and include the safety aspects in their businesses. I think with this, Tatenda, I'm done.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from Denford. Please go ahead. Denford?
Are you hearing me, Tatend?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. I've got a question, particularly on the watchdog, who have just presented. From what you have said, you respond to complaints, you do the awareness, but do you at one point go to the store, just randomly test products or the water? Because it seems like you are reacting to the problems, but what are the measures you are putting in place to make sure that all the processors, all the producers, they are compliant? Because if you go on the market, if you go to Mbari, there are a lot of non-compliant products, and you put the burden on the consumer. But what are you doing to make sure that those products, they don't find their way into the market? Because there's several, it seems like there are loopholes, but the watchdog is there, but the watchdog is not doing anything. Especially in the informal market, Zimbabwe is more informalized, if we had to say. But it seems like the informal sector, it's not actually, there's no oversight on the informal sector, on the quality, and then it gives a big burden to a big processor who's spending a lot of money to comply and to have audits and to have inspection, and to have tests. And then at the end, the big processor is non-competitive compared to someone who had bypassed all the inspection. So what are you doing to make sure that even the small processors are compliant? Why can't you come up with a certification program that is tailor-made or general basic GFSI basic for the smaller ones, so that at least each and every processor must have a way of accountability? Because if something breaks out, if there's a breakout, if there's an outbreak, it seems like that's when people start to react, and there is no system to trace where is it coming from. Some of the things end up going without even finding the sources. There was a typhoid case. I don't know if the source was identified. So are there any measures which you are doing as the watchdog to make sure you are proactive in putting systems in place to protect the consumer and also to protect businesses which are compliant against non-compliant ones? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Denford, your contribution. Tulani, would you like to take that question?
Okay. I will take it in two ways from what the participant has just highlighted. Thank you so much for bringing it up. And all of us, we know that this is a challenge, is an emerging challenge in our country, especially on the informal sector. The word on its own would tell you that it's it's an informal sector. It's not formalized. But if you look at the developments, the government has been working tirelessly to make sure that the informal sector to comply with all the regulations that are there in this country to, at the end of the day, to protect you and me, who's the consumer. I hope you have also been following some media recently where there were fake goods that were discovered in the informal sector. So it's not like the government is sitting down and not doing anything. But I would say that the onus is number one on the business side to comply with the regulations, like you indicated, to make sure that they at least to attain minimum standards in terms of their regulations, so that they can able to produce products that are of good quality and as well as for the safety of the public. Yeah. I indicated in my presentation that we have in this country Standard Association of Zimbabwe, which is an accreditation body who accredit in terms of local standards for businesses and also international standards like the ISO standards, so that the businesses can able to trade or to able to attain international certifications. But they are there, the local standards, if you go to, because it's a standard making body for the country. So they're there local standards that are not as expensive as compared to international standards like the ISO and so forth. So it is the onus on the business, men and women, who comply with those standards. But however, my second point is the consumer. The consumer has a right. The consumer has a right, even as I pointed out in terms of reporting to these two powerful organizations in our country, so that if you see something suspicious, yes, you can able to report there. But above all, the other right that the consumer has got, the consumer is carrying the money. Why buy goods where you also can able to see that this place is not as clean as it should be? You're carrying your wallet, so you have got a voting power in terms of your wallet. Why would you buy there? That is my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tulani. I'll move on to Titi. Businesses are responsible for ensuring that they manufacture safe food and safeguard public health. What can businesses do when they suspect that a product is unsafe?
Thank you so much, Tatenda, for that question. So when you notice that there is an issue with your product and say you're trying to identify or understand what happened, the first thing that you have to do is for you to stop distribution. When we say stop, we are saying stop and assess what happened before you can continue. So normally we communicate with our clients for them to hold that particular batch of product. We communicate, so this is called a product recall, because the product, if the product has gone to the market, we call it a product recall. But if it's still within the business entity, then it becomes a product withdrawal. So if it's in the market, you communicate with the customers or the people that you have sold the product to, and communicate the date that it was manufactured, you communicate the batch number, and also you let them know that the product is not safe for them to redistribute or for them to consume while pending your investigations. Then when the product is now put on hold, this communication may not just be to your clients. Maybe you may need to also engage the SARS or publicize it in the paper, or even engage the Ministry of Health, depending on how serious it is. If you're an organization that is certified, for example, maybe you are certified by SABS as a certification body, you also need to notify them of your product recall. Then you need to investigate on what happened during that particular shift, who was present, what documentation was done. And today, because we are focusing on water quality, you then check the records to say, were the records done to show that the water used in this particular product, were they recorded properly? So all these activities that we are doing, they're called the root cause analysis. You're now looking at the people that were on the shift, you're looking at the records, you're looking at the tests that were done. Where was any water sample collected and sent out to the laboratory? What were the results? What could have happened? At which stage could this problem emanated from? Because in the processes that we do in our different businesses, some are we subject our products to heat. Sometimes we cool. So you now need to do a step-by-step assessment to check where could this problem happen, where could it have happened in our processing line. Then when you find all that information, you consolidate it. We have different quality tools that we can apply. There is the fishbone. There are different quality tools that can be used. So when you do that and you now have a concrete answer to your problem, then now you can now determine to say, do we take back everything that is on the market, or it was a false alarm? That way, then decisions can then be made, and you can now advise your client to send back the product, or you take it back and you discard it yourself, or you can continue selling, because sometimes there are false alarms that can come from the market. And also, we normally use retention samples as well. So you test what is on the market, you also test what you remain with. So when you make a product, or when you make a batch, it's normally advisable to have retention samples that should remain within your facility. That way, someone can come and say, this product has made me sick, and maybe so it's water or whatever product you're making. You can now go back to your retention sample for that same batch, and you check and you match to say, okay, what is the result on the retention sample? What is the result on the market? If there are different, say, market segments, you can now pick virus samples from the virus market segments, and you test them against your retention sample to validate that that issue. Thank you, Tatenda.
Thank you, Titi. That was well articulated. We've got a question from Yvonne. Most food businesses are run from home. Should the business owner trust the water that the city council supplies, or it's mandatory that he or she test the water? Should he or she trust that the relevant authorities have done necessary steps and measures to ensure safety? Tulani, I think you can take that question. And Tatenda, I think you can also assist on what they can do if a home run business can do to ensure that the water is safe.
Thank you, Tatenda. Thank you for that important question. I would say this again, like I said it. If you are running a business, treat it like the water that you are, which is a key ingredient to your business. Even if it's coming from a municipality, treat it like raw water. What do you mean by raw water? It means that you just have to know the quality of the source water. Just treat it like that. Don't trust that the municipality water is clean. It has proven here in Zimbabwe, I'll repeat it again, the issues of the quality of water from our municipalities, that it has not been good. And I've highlighted the very fact that it is coming from the problem that the infrastructure is now old. The water infrastructure is now old for all the municipality here in Zimbabwe. So it introduces at the final end the quality of the water that is not desirable for consumption. So I would advise that when you're running a business at home, make sure you test your source water before you can use it for your food business. I thank you.
Thank you, Tulani. Tatenda?
Thank you, Tatenda. Thank you. I think it's Yvonne that asked the question. Okay. I do agree with what Mr. Tulani is saying. You should not solely rely on the water that's coming out of your tape, right? I think also Tulani mentioned earlier on during this webinar that some of our systems, they're very old, some of our infrastructure. So in as much as you want to try to trust the water that's coming out of your tape, there is something that changes, from point A to point B, from where the water is being treated to you getting the water out of the tap. You never know where there is a breakage in the pipes, a sewer cross-contamination with the water, something that might happen even if after the water has been treated at Zinwa there. But then the water that you will get there is not going to be safe. So it's always advised to seek for further testing, right? And I also feel like we've been talking about fecal contamination, like fecal bacteria. I know that, but then when we talk about water quality, it's not all about the bacteria and all that. There's also chemical analysis that you're supposed to do on your water, on your water samples. Your water samples. You have to look for certain things in water. These things like heavy metals, like your mercury, your lead. You're also supposed to check for that. So these are some of the tests that you can also, you can also ask a certain lab to actually do that for you. And you have other, where you look for nutrients in water. We have cases where water has phosphates and nitrates, which are things that you will usually find in a garden or like a farm, right? But then that cross-contamination can also happen. Then your water might not necessarily have your bacteria or your total coliforms, but it might have nutrients that are not supposed to be there. So get the water. If you're running a food business, just get the water. Usually all the tests are done, even just 1 liter of that water, right? Take it to the lab. Request for microbial water testing, and also for chemical, like what we call physical chemical tests that you're supposed to run, and then they'll run that for you. Then they'll tell you whether the water is safe or not for you to actually use that water to run your business. Because at the end of the day, if you don't check that, you sell your products, people are going to fall sick. They'll come back to you. They don't know about the water, right? You can't tell them, nah, it's because the water that I used came from Zinwa, or that. To them, that doesn't make any sense. You are the one who's responsible for your raw materials, and water is one of your raw materials. You're supposed to clean your water to make sure that it's safe for use when you're producing your products. So you are the one who's responsible for that. So it's always advisable if you're running a small business or any business, and you use water to make your products, your food products, it's always advisable to go to the lab and seek the relevant tests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatenda. I think one other key question that I would ask is, how much would it cost for a small business owner to test the water? And in order of priority, which test would they start with?
All right. The prices vary. We'll have to look at my price list because there's just a lot of tests that you can get done on a water sample, just depending on. I think one of the other things that I also forgot to mention was when we talk about water quality, it's also about where do you stay. If you're staying in places where there is a lot of gold panning, chances are you're gonna get contaminated water with your mercury, because it's usually used for gold panning and all that. So like gold purification, your mercury, your arsenic. So it just depends on where you're staying. So those are some of the things that we also look at, and before we advise on certain tests, right? And if you're staying in an agricultural place, we'll tell you might need to get the phosphates, the nitrites also tested for. In terms of priority, to be fair, we just have to look at WHO regulations, right? With other things, there's sort of certain quantities that they can allow. If we're looking at just chemicals like your cadmium, your mercuries, they'll tell you you can't have more than 1 parts per billion in a ml of water, just 1 milliliter of water. But I think the most, the one that you actually have to get tested for is the coliforms and the E. coli, because that's something that is not supposed to be in water. you cannot afford to have that in water. So whenever you go, if money is what's limiting you, you go for the molecular for the microbial tests like your coliforms, your E. coli. You can even check for your for other species, and that's something that you should also that's something that you should prioritize when it comes to testing. In terms of prices, maybe Titi could also share the emails, and I could share with them the price list of every test, and what sort of test based on where they stay, what sort of test should they be requesting. I think that's something that I can also do later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatenda. We've got a question from Denford. What has Consumer Council done to municipalities supplying unsafe water to consumers? Tulani, can you take that one?
Thank you so much, Tatenda. The Consumer Council of Zimbabwe is a watchdog. It is not an enforcer. But whereas the Consumer Protection Council or Commission, sorry, is the one that enforces in terms of reporting. If someone reports that there is a problem of water in a municipality, but the other body that enforces is the Ministry of Health. I, for one, having worked for many years in the water sector, I know that the Ministry of Health has closed some councils from operating up until they comply with certain processes in their system. But the Consumer Council per se is just but a watchdog. So what I would urge is that the consumers to report to the commission enacted in an act, they can able to enforce and take the council to right into the courtroom. So, but a Consumer Council does not have those powers. But whereas the commission have got the powers to sue, if ever they've got evidence now coming from the consumers, they can able to sue any council who has we have broken the law. But as well as the Ministry of Health is very important, where consumers can also take their complaints to the Ministry of Health, because the Ministry of Health is so powerful. Using their Public Health Act, they can able also to press some charges on anyone who's not complying with that kind of act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question from Yvonne. Where in Bulawayo can I get water tested and how much does it cost? I think question on cost has been answered. We're going to get more information from Titi. And in Bulawayo, Tatenda, where can they get their water tested?
I think Titi might have more information on that. She's the one who usually knows the labs and all that. I think Titi might be the best person to ask for that. I think she's just
Thank you. SAZ. Any more questions from the floor? Contributions from the panel?
Tatenda, can I come through on the testing laboratories in Bulawayo? We have Standard Association of Zimbabwe. We have the municipality, Bulawayo municipality, the laboratory is called Criterion. And also we have got the School of Mines laboratory. We have also NAST, National University of Science and Technology laboratory. So those are the 4 laboratories that one can able to take their samples in Bulawayo. The costs, they range from, depending on the parameters that you're looking for. If let me talk about full chemical and full bacteriological combined. You pay more or less from $40 to $50 thereabout. It should not be more than that in general, in terms of the cost.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from Lois Gonyamo. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Tatenda, for giving me the floor. Mine is a kind of a comment. I just want to applaud you, Titi, and your team at the Global Food Business Network for organizing, webinars like these that educate Zimbabweans and consumers on what is safe and what is not safe. We talked about the rise or the increase in the number of informal food and beverage manufacturers and people who are preparing food. And it's important that consumers are made aware of the dangers of what they are consuming, and so that they can make the right decisions. Some consumers are supporting this industry due to lack of knowledge. They don't know the risks that are before them. Some do know, but they don't have other options. So I just want to applaud you. If more PVOs would come up and take their time to educate consumers on what to look out for, how to read food labels, for certification logos, and what it means to a consumer. How do you feel safe before eating a food? Will go a long way in ensuring that more Zimbabweans are educated on food safety. And that pressure, if we put that pressure on food suppliers, then more food suppliers are going to go for certification, because that's what their consumers will be demanding. So well done, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Titi, any comment?
Thank you very much to the other panelists. It was really eye-opening to learn about what Zenwa is doing. And also for me, my key takeout from this meeting was the knowledge that we can collaborate with Zenwa as a business to work with them in ensuring that our water source for production and processing is of good quality. And it's something that we didn't know as quality experts. We embark on this journey clueless sometimes, and we find our way, not knowing that there are entities and bodies that can actually help us and pave the way in the right direction. Thank you so much, Mr. Sibanda, for the insightful information. And also on the molecular side, I learned quite a lot, and I think I need to see some of the 3Ds that Tatenda was talking about. So thank you very much, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Titi. Any closing remarks from you, Tatenda?
Thank you. Well, firstly, Mrs. Munyamo said, you guys are doing a very good job in terms of these webinars and all that. It's always really good. Like we said, you mentioned or you asked that question about being proactive or being reactive. I feel like this is actually a step towards being proactive. Educating people, letting people be aware of what's happening is a proactive, measure. We don't want to have a webinar during an outbreak of cholera, and we're talking on how to prevent, how to treat cholera. That's a reactive thing, So these webinars, I feel they're very good. they're very proactive. And I would just want to say, you guys, you should continue with, continue doing such a good job. And it's always an honor to, to get invited to just give, what I think, what I know in these webinars. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank Mr. Tulani from Zinwa. So many years of experience, from that side. I also learned, quite something, information that I could also share with people, when I'm talking about, food, water quality testing, and I now have some, some information that I actually didn't know, and I learned today from Mr. Tulani. Thank you very much. And thank you to T for the good job, and to Tatenda, thank you for hosting me. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Tatenda. Tulani, before you share your closing remarks, we've got a question from Yvonne. In the event that my water has been taken for testing and is found not worthy or safe for consumption, what's my next step? How do I treat the water, considering that I'm using pipe water system?
Thank you for that brilliant question. There are different further treatment technologies. This question supposes that, to me, sounds like someone who's doing business in their house, in their home. So once you discover that the municipality water that you are receiving is not of good quality, then you have to do what is called pre-treatment. Depending now on what is the problem with the source water. Let me give you an example. Maybe let's say in that source water, it didn't comply with the microbiological parameters. So you can as part of your pre-treatment system that you can introduce a UV disinfection, kind of system. Or if it is high on turbidity, you can introduce a pre-filtration system or unit, so that you can able to take care of the turbidity levels. So there are many systems, pre-treatment systems that are there in the market, depending on what is or the quality of the water, the source water that has come out. So get hold of us. We can assist you and give you some advice on what exactly you can able to use to treat that water.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tulani. At this point in time, I would like to thank our incredible panelists, Tsitsi, Tulani, and Tatenda, for their valuable insights and the candid conversation. They've not only highlighted the challenges, but they've also prepared us powerful solutions that we now have at our fingertips. I think this was quite an insightful discussion. And I would also like to thank our panel, our audience, Lois, Yvonne, Denford, Bright, and all the other guys that I cannot mention at this point in time. But thank you so much for attending this webinar. We've learned that the water quality is not just a regulatory issue, it is a fundamental pillar of food safety. We've learned from Tulani that we need to engage regulators like Zinwa to ensure that the water that we're using is safe. And Tatenda has also shown us that there are so many technologies that are at our disposal to use for water testing. Thank you for engaging us. Thank you for participating. And I would love to say that the responsibility is upon us as consumers. It's upon us as business owners. It's also upon us as employees at food manufacturing entities to ensure that the water that we use is safe and that we are maintaining and upholding food safety. Let's take this conversation forward. Let's be advocates for a safer food supply chain and let's educate our families and friends on safe water. Thank you everyone for participating in our webinar. I wish you a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you, Tatenda.
Thanks, Tatenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Tatenda.